They say a mother's love has no limits. But what happens when that love is no longer welcome? I raised her with everything I had, even when I had nothing left to give. And on the happiest day of her life, she looked me in the eyes and said I wasn't family. Everyone laughed nervously, pretending not to hear. But I heard it, clear as thunder. The air turned cold, like the walls themselves were listening. Still, I smiled, because I came prepared. Sometimes, the truth doesn't scream, it waits, inside a simple, wrapped box. And when I opened mine, everything she built came crumbling down. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Old Folks channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The air shimmered with laughter and the faint scent of roses as I stepped through the doorway. Golden ribbons hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the afternoon light that spilled through tall windows. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor as I carried the small gift box close to my chest, wrapped neatly in silver paper, tied with a pale pink bow. Everywhere I looked, there were smiles, but not one turned toward me. My daughter stood near the center, glowing in her maternity dress, surrounded by friends and in-laws. I waited for her eyes to find mine, but they never did. The music was cheerful, yet the silence between us felt louder. A fragile distance hung in the air, like glass about to crack. I told myself she was busy. But somewhere deep inside, something whispered, or maybe she doesn't want you here. The warmth that wasn't. Someone pressed a glass of punch into my hand, and I smiled politely. Conversations floated around me, light, meaningless chatter, yet I could feel the weight of glances brushing against me, quick and uncertain. A few guests whispered, then stopped when I looked their way. I tried to join the laughter, to remember this was my daughter's day. But every word felt foreign, every sound slightly hollow. I stood beside the dessert table, watching her from afar, her hand resting on her belly, her smile too perfect. She hadn't even said hello. Not one word. My fingers tightened around the glass until it trembled. I wondered, was I invisible here, or was I being erased? The hint. A woman with bright red lipstick leaned toward another and whispered something. I caught only a fragment, she wasn't even supposed to come. The words struck like ice water. My pulse quickened. The laughter around me dimmed, fading into a distant hum. I turned to look at my daughter again, searching her face for any sign of warmth, of recognition. But she was laughing, not with me, but at something her husband said, her head tilted back in joy I no longer recognized. My throat tightened as I realized, maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, the gift in my hand suddenly felt heavier, as if it carried the answer to a question no one dared to ask. At last, her eyes found mine, only for a second. Her smile was polite, practiced, the kind people wear when strangers approach. She didn't move toward me, didn't open her arms like she used to. Just a soft nod, like I was one of the guests, not her mother. "Mom," she said, her voice smooth but distant. "You made it." I wanted to say, of course I did. "You're my daughter." But the words stuck in my throat. The warmth I expected wasn't there, instead, there was an invisible wall, one built from years of silence and something I couldn't name. When she looked away, I felt it, the ache of being known, yet no longer recognized. The distance grows. As the afternoon went on, she moved from guest to guest, hugging, laughing, glowing. I stayed in my corner, unnoticed. Her husband, Daniel, glanced at me once, quickly, then turned back to refill drinks. I could tell he knew. He always did. He was the one who'd drawn the line years ago. When someone asked about family, my daughter gestured to his parents. "These are the ones who raised me," she said lightly, not realizing how her words sliced through me like paper-thin knives. The chatter drowned out my breath. My heart began to pound in my ears. I set my untouched punch down before my hands could betray me. Was this how a mother disappears, not with death, but with dismissal? The whisper. Later, as she walked past me to reach another guest, her perfume brushed my cheek, familiar yet foreign. I opened my mouth to speak, but she leaned close and whispered, "Please, Mom, just don't make today about you." The words hit harder than any slap. Her smile stayed frozen for the crowd, but her eyes begged me to stay quiet. I nodded, swallowing the storm that rose inside. I didn't cry, not yet. But deep down, I began to wonder if this baby shower was really meant to celebrate life, or to bury a relationship long dead. The room filled with gifts, pink balloons, and sugar-coated laughter. Every laugh felt rehearsed, sharp, echoing in my head like a mocking song. I sat at a table near the edge, tracing circles on my napkin. I remembered when she used to call me her best friend. When she cried into my shoulder, swore she'd never shut me out. That memory hurt now, too pure for this cold room. Then someone clinked a spoon on a glass. "It's time for the gifts," someone called. The crowd cheered. My heart sank. Because I knew, the moment of truth was coming. The ignorance. She opened gift after gift, smiling brightly, calling out names. From Aunt Lucy. From Mom-in-law. But when she reached the small silver box I'd placed on the table, her hand hesitated, just for a moment. "Who's this from?" she asked softly. Silence spread like a shadow. I cleared my throat. "It's from me," I said quietly. "From your mother." The way she froze, it was as if I'd broken an unspoken rule. Her smile faltered, and the chatter around us dimmed. The words that cut. She forced a laugh. "Oh, right," she said, brushing it off. "Well, you didn't have to." Someone interrupted, whispering something in her ear. She gave a small nod, then turned back to me. "Mom," she said, her tone suddenly sharper, quieter, meant for me alone. "Let's not make this awkward, okay? You're not really part of this side of the family anymore." For a second, the world stopped spinning. The air left the room. Every pair of eyes shifted toward us, curious, pitying, judging. I smiled faintly, but inside, something broke with a sound only I could hear. I stood there, feeling everyone's eyes burn into me. My daughter turned away, pretending nothing had happened. A quiet laughter began again, forced, uneasy, like the room was trying to forget what it had just witnessed. I sat back down, staring at the silver box still unopened in her hands. The gift I'd spent days preparing. The truth she didn't yet know rested inside, patient and silent. I wanted to scream, to ask why. But instead, I folded my hands in my lap and smiled. Because I knew something she didn't. Something she would soon see. Memories of love. As I sat there, memories drifted in, her first birthday cake smeared across her face, the way she clung to my neck on her first day of school, the nights I stayed awake so she could sleep. Every moment of love, every sacrifice, every time I put her before myself. And now she looked at me like a stranger. I wondered what had poisoned her heart, words from her husband, or wounds from the past I couldn't heal. A soft tear slid down my cheek, hidden behind a polite smile. No one noticed, except Daniel, who avoided my gaze. He knew. Oh, he knew. The weight of truth. The host handed her another gift, trying to move on. But she hesitated, glancing at my unopened box again. Her fingers twitched, uncertain. For a moment, our eyes met. Then she sighed, "Fine, I'll open it." The chatter dimmed again, curiosity in every gaze. As she reached for the pink ribbon, I held my breath. Because inside that silver box wasn't just a gift, it was a truth buried for years. And once she saw it, nothing would ever be the same again. She pulled the ribbon loose, the soft fabric sliding like a whisper through her fingers. The silver paper shimmered under the light, tearing slowly, each rip echoing like thunder in the silence. Her expression was still, unreadable. Finally, she lifted the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, and a tiny photograph. Her brow furrowed. "What is this?" she asked, her tone uneasy. I said nothing. Her hand shook slightly as she opened the paper, and began to read. The letter. Her lips moved silently, tracing each word, words I had written the night she was born. It was a letter I'd never meant to send, a confession of the truth. About how her father hadn't died in the accident she'd been told about, but had left us. How I'd protected her from a truth too painful for a child. Her eyes flicked up to me, wide, trembling. "You knew," she whispered. "All this time?" My throat tightened. "I did it to protect you," I said softly. "You deserved peace, not pain." Gasps rippled through the room. But no one moved. The truth hung heavy, like fog that refused to lift. The realization. She looked at the photograph, a picture of her father holding her as a baby. Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. The crowd around us had faded, there was only her and me now, standing in the wreckage of old lies and broken love. Her lips trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, "Because I didn't want you to hate him, or me." Her hand fell to her belly, as if to shield her own child from the same pain. And in that moment, I saw it. The first crack in her wall of anger. But forgiveness takes time. The room had fallen silent, too silent. I could hear the faint buzz of the ceiling fan, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. No one dared to speak, as if the air itself had thickened around us. My daughter stood frozen, letter in hand, her eyes locked on the photo that trembled between her fingers. Then came the whispers, quiet at first, then spreading like ripples in a still pond. "Did you know?" someone whispered to Daniel. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, guilt flickering behind his polished smile. I realized then, he already knew. The truth unfolds. My daughter turned to him, her voice shaking. "You knew about this? About my father?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was written all over his face. She dropped the letter onto the table as if it had burned her skin. "You let me hate her all these years," she said. "You told me she drove him away." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. He glanced at me, not with apology, but with fear. He knew what was coming next. And for the first time in years, my daughter stood on my side of the line. The breaking point. Her tears turned to anger, sharp and raw. "You used me," she said to him, her voice trembling. "You made me believe she wasn't family." Daniel tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. Every guest was silent, their smiles gone, their phones lowered. I stayed still, watching the family I once knew crumble in front of a pile of wrapping paper and pink balloons. It was a moment I had dreaded, and somehow needed. Because sometimes, truth doesn't heal, it burns everything down first. The storm that followed was quiet but fierce. My daughter's voice cracked as she demanded answers from her husband. "How long have you known?" she asked. He rubbed his forehead, muttering, "Since before we married. Your father contacted me once, told me his side. I thought it was best you never knew." Her breath hitched. "You decided that for me?" I wanted to comfort her, but I knew this wasn't my fight anymore. It was hers. And yet, I could feel her pain like it was my own heartbeat. The reflection. She turned to me slowly, eyes red and wet. "You hid it too," she said. "You both did." Her words cut, but I didn't flinch. "Yes," I whispered. "Because I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was wrong." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in the quiet, I saw her shoulders drop, exhaustion washing over her like a heavy tide. Her hands went to her stomach again, protective, trembling. And I realized, she wasn't just grieving the past. She was terrified of repeating it. The glimpse of mercy. Finally, she picked up the letter again, folding it gently this time. Her eyes softened, just a little. "I need time," she whispered. "But, thank you for being here." The words were small, hesitant, but they were a beginning. I nodded, holding back tears. "That's all I ever wanted," I said. Outside, thunder rolled softly, as if the sky had been listening. And in that echo, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. When I returned home that night, the house felt heavier than before. The air still smelled faintly of the rain that had started after I left the shower. I placed my coat on the chair and sat by the window, where the moonlight fell across the photo of my daughter as a baby. So much of life, I realized, is about silence, the words we never say, the truths we never dare to tell. And sometimes, love hides behind those silences, waiting to be understood too late. The clock ticked softly. I waited for it to sound like peace, but it only sounded like time lost. The memory. As the night deepened, I found myself whispering to the empty room. "I did what I thought was right," I said, my voice cracking. I remembered the day her father left, the slammed door, the shattered vase, the way I held her while pretending everything would be fine. Maybe that was my curse, trying to protect everyone except myself. The shadows in the room felt alive, moving gently as if listening. And for a moment, I swore I heard her voice, younger, forgiving, from years ago, calling me Mama. The knock. Just as I began to drift into sleep, there was a soft knock at the door. 3 slow, hesitant taps. My heart skipped. I hesitated, who could it be, at this hour? When I opened the door, my daughter stood there in the rain, clutching the silver box to her chest. Her hair was wet, her eyes swollen, but her voice was steady. "Can I come in?" she asked. And that's when I knew, the past had finally let her go. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket. The old clock ticked softly between us, marking each second of silence. She looked at me with the eyes of a woman and the heart of the child I once knew. "I read the letter again," she said finally. "Every word." I waited, afraid to speak, afraid to hope. She took a shaky breath. "You weren't the villain I made you out to be. You were just trying to hold everything together." The tears I'd held back for years finally fell. The truth shared. We talked for hours, about her father, her pain, my guilt, her fears. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses, tears, even anger that still needed to bleed out. But under all of it was something fragile and new, understanding. She asked, "Why did you save that letter all these years?" I smiled faintly. "Because I knew someday, you'd be ready to know the truth." She reached across the table, took my hand, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." And that was enough. The light returns. The rain stopped outside. A faint sunrise peeked through the curtains, painting the kitchen gold. She smiled softly. "You'll be part of this baby's life," she said. "I promise." My heart trembled, fragile but alive. We sat there, 2 women bound by love and loss, finding our way back through forgiveness. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family. I felt like a mother again. Months later, I was back in that same hall, same decorations, same laughter, but this time, everything felt lighter. My daughter introduced me proudly, "This is my mom. The strongest woman I know." Her eyes sparkled with peace, and her husband smiled, humbled by what had changed. I watched her unwrap gifts again, her belly now round and glowing. When she reached the silver box, she smiled, not with pain, but gratitude. And in that smile, I saw forgiveness, alive and real. The embrace. When the party ended, she came to me and hugged me tight, no hesitation, no distance. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she whispered. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, remembering the baby I once rocked to sleep. Every ache, every wound, every lonely night, all of it had led to this single moment of peace. Sometimes love takes years to return. But when it does, it comes home quietly, like a sunrise after a storm. The legacy. That night, I placed the letter back in its box, tied it with a new ribbon, and tucked it away for my granddaughter. Someday, she'll read it, and maybe she'll understand the same truth her mother finally did. That love isn't about perfection. It's about staying, even when you've been pushed away. I looked out the window, where fireflies danced in the garden. And for the first time in a long while, I whispered a quiet thank you, to life, to time, and to second chances. They called it a baby shower, but it felt more like a storm. A mother's silence became her loudest revenge. Sometimes love doesn't need to scream, it only needs to reveal the truth. And when it does, the world shifts, quietly but forever. The daughter learned that day that shame cuts deeper than anger. And the mother? She walked away, not broken, but free. Because real family doesn't come from names or invitations. It comes from the people who never stop showing up, even when they're no longer wanted. And as the door closed behind her, the echo wasn't sadness, it was peace. The kind of peace you earn, after surviving love's cruelest betrayal.